Thank you for joining us, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.
Let's see that. Tell us, our audience, our television audience, a bit about yourself. You have a very impressive background. No deny it. That's very great. In your work here with U.S. Congress, you have really a lot of the job that you did. It's impressive. Some simulation of the struggle between the countries, threat to the terrorists, potential impact of the revolution of terrorism. Can you tell us what you see? And I see it that these two books that you wrote, The Coming Revolution, my viewer, and you have to read it, and The War of Ideas. Ideas like Ahmadinejad and ideas of the free world. We're talking about everything. Can you give us some background about what we're talking about this book?
Sure.
And effective of this book for the people that read it, why they have to read it, how serious is what you're saying in here, please?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity, first of all. Over the past 21 years of my life in America, I came here in 1990. I was born and raised in Beirut, Lebanon. And I immigrated to the United States with the collapse of the Soviet Union. I used to be a professor, a publisher in Beirut, and I was part of the War of Ideas even in the 80s. So most of the ideas that I published about in the 1990s and after 9/11 were already part of a previous experience closer to the Middle East. I have published articles on the rise of the jihadist movement even before the collapse of the Soviet Union. I've actually published a number of books on the treatment of religious minorities and ethnic minorities across the board in the Middle East. And I even published a small book in Arabic on the rise of the Khomeiniist Islamic revolution and the long-range ambitions of the Khomeiniist leadership out of Beirut. That was 7 years after the revolution. Unfortunately, that work in the 80s was not translated in English. It only ended up here in the Library of Congress, like all books around the world, so it was not really influential. It was only in 1990, 1991, when I relocated to the United States and became American, that I have started to teach at universities. I got a PhD from the States and started to teach. And because of my teaching in Middle Eastern studies, the U.S. Congress, as of the mid-90s, asked me to start testifying, researching, briefing members of Congress. They had two interests. The interest number one was human rights and democracy in the Middle East, in the post-Soviet Middle East. And this is where I started to raise the issue of the lack of democracy in Iran, of the lack of democracy in the Arab world, of the ongoing genocides in Sudan and southern Sudan, and later on in Darfur, on the Syrian occupation of Lebanon, on the suppression of the role of women in Saudi Arabia and in Iran, and of course with the Taliban, suppressive regime came to exist. But there was something else that the members of Congress were interested in, which was the jihadi threat. And the jihadi threat, I already divided it before 9/11 into two kinds. The one that comes from the Wahhabi, Salafi, which worse shape is Al-Qaeda, but which has many militant forms, such as the Muslim Brotherhood, the Wahhabis. That's one species. But there is this other species that was not well known in the West of jihadism, and I call it state jihadism, meaning a jihadi ideology which is basically supported by a regime, in this case, the Ayatollahs of Iran. And it's based on my briefings that after 9/11, I decided to publish a series of books destined, for the American public, the international public, and specifically for members of Congress and the European Parliament, to understand that what we are facing, and this is the war of ideas, what we are facing is a full-fledged confrontation between the forces of democracy in the Middle East and the forces of fascism or jihadism in this case. Should it be the Khomeiniist version or the Salafist version? And my first book was the Future Jihad, Strategies Against the West. And the second book that you can show here is the War of Ideas. And this book basically is to have the American public understand that this is not just about few politics and security issues. It's a full-fledged vertical division in that world in the same way during the Cold War. You have one project, the Soviet Union, and the other project, the free world. And today you have one project, the Iranian leadership being one of its players, and the free world. And lately, I have decided also to move to explain that the real response to the threat of jihadism in the region is freedom, democratic movements. So I published last year the second book, that one, The Coming Revolution. This is not this year. This book was published in 2010. I finished writing it on July 4th, 2010. And it was published in the fall. And then, of course, we saw what happened in the Arab world.
That's interesting, Mr. Phares. This happened a few months ago, and you wrote that. May I ask you? I know that your knowledge, and you're born there in culture. You know better than all the foreigners that what's happening in there. But really, you believe that will come up that soon, 1 year?
Let me tell you that as somebody who followed both the oppressive forces and the freedom forces for 30 years, you can read what they're saying, and what they're saying is important. In the past years, in the past decades, should it be Iran or Egypt or Lebanon, because of no freedom, no media, it was very difficult to detect what the people wanted. But when internet started to go up, the Lebanese Cedars Revolution was based on Twitter, SMS. They got 1 million people in the streets. The Iranian Green Revolution was known as what? What was the main player? As the Twitter. And then on and on and on. We saw already that the peoples of the region, when they go online, when the youth, when the young generations go online, they express with freedom. So what I did is not that difficult at the end of the day. Because we know how our peoples, our nations, where we came from, think. We only wanted to see the expression. And bloggers, online, Facebook, all of that told us that the civil societies are sick and tired with these authoritarian regimes. And actually, to be very quick about it and clear about it, the Cedars Revolution of Lebanon and the Green Revolution of Iran told us that the rest is going to follow.
Mr. Phares, I saw Lebanon when I was young. I was singer. And I were only in Beirut for 2 days. Still, I'm 69. I remember how beautiful it was. Yeah. And it was for me very sad. We call it the Paris of the Middle East. Right. And I don't know, still I don't know how changed that country now, still after years and years, that beautiful country with that good people. Why they don't have the one country always fight? Now is everybody out of country helping someone like this Hezbollah or someone to destroy that country. What happened to the Lebanese people? We know that what happened to Iran, mistake was us and other countries out there that didn't help us to get, because everybody thought the changing the regime of Shah will get the people what they didn't have. But with this revolution, they lost everything they had even. Yeah. Because, what happened?
I read you very well, because I was probably much younger when I was in Lebanon, and there were many Iranians who used to visit Lebanon. See, Beirut and Tehran were the Paris and the New York of the Middle East. This was vibrant, large segments of educated people, large number of universities, of newspapers, journalists shuttling from Beirut to Tehran. So these populations lived a similar experience before. And then a similar force, one force, took over in Tehran in 1979. That's the Khomeinist regime, the Pasdaran and all their militias. And then exported to Lebanon, to the Bekaa Valley, as of 1981. Pasdaran, Revolutionary Guards, who started to work on forming an organization which name became Hezbollah. And that Hezbollah, with the help of another authoritarian regime, the Syrian dictatorship, which, by the way, now is fighting its own people, to form a very large organization, claiming that they were there for the fight against Israel. Reality was that they received training and money and support from the mothership. You come from the mothership, and I come from the small ship. And the mothership helped Hezbollah and its allies basically to take over large segments of Lebanon. And today, reality is that Lebanon is suffering from the omnipresence of a terrorist organization, and we saw that the Hezbollah have a problem with the United States, with France, went as far as Algeria, but in Lebanon, they have persecuted Lebanese. Hezbollah has attacked the Lebanese population on May 7 and 8 of 2008. So, as in Iran, Lebanon has the problem of a fundamentalist force which is opposed to democracy, which has an ideology which is jihadist. But I feel that in Lebanon and in Iran you have also the same responses. The solution is not coming from the outside. It's coming from the inside. 1.2 million or more Lebanese took to the streets of Lebanon. They had Sunni, they had Christian, they had Shia, they had Druze, and 1.5 million people took to the streets of Tehran a few years later. They had from all the areas, and they had women, they had young, they had older, and they had people from middle class and lower class. I think those two countries are the ones which are going to do the ultimate change of the Middle East. What happened in Tunisia, in Libya, what's happening in Syria today are the spring of the Arabs, or the Arab Spring. What will happen in Iran and Lebanon will be the Middle East Spring.
I don't know, I love to have your idea about these things that the Iranian people, a lot of the people of Iran, they saying it. They said that this is not the first time that America doesn't deliver what they promise. It happens in Iraq before with Kurdish people. And now this time we came to a street. We came to a street that say we don't want this government. We don't want to be hated by the other country, and we don't hate anyone. We want a peace, we want a love, we want a something. And we expected at least the President of the United States will support us. But they didn't. They didn't say it. We thought that they are there for us. What you think? What's your idea about that? What you think about that?
It is very sad to think that at a very opportune moment of history, whereby the leadership of the United States could have, with words, not with planes, not with soldiers, not with money, with words, shift the balance in Iran and send a strong message to the Iranian people and to those hundreds of thousands of young people, the people of Neda. And that would have basically begun the struggle against the authoritarian regime. All what the President of the United States and its Congress had to do is what they have done for Egypt, what they have done for Tunisia, what they may be doing for Syria, and even, to be humanitarian and help the case of Libya. When in June of 2009, for the first time, we were in disbelief to see how courageous were the Iranians and the younger and the youngest, 1.5 million people in the streets of Tehran. I thought myself, well, Washington now has to strike with words. Unfortunately, to be clear about it, the advisors, the academics, the scholars who usually provide advice to the decision makers said that if you say any word, they will backfire. But who was behind those academic advisors and scholarship? Petrodollars, dineros. So when the statement came out of the administration that we don't want the United States to be seen as meddling in Iranian domestic affairs, that was the result of years of scholarship that was putting pressure on the administration and telling them, don't disturb it because there will be a backlash. Well, what happened in Egypt? What happened in Tunisia and the rest of the Arab world is the opposite. Actually, what happened in Eastern Europe. Remember when Eastern Europe rose, Eastern Europeans in Poland, in Czech, in Slovakia, in Romania told us, we were waiting for a word.
That's true.
And I think the Iranian people, smart people, educated people from all walks of life, are waiting for a word. And when that word will come, basically it will change the landscape of politics. And I think now that the President in his speech for the Middle East and now in London has begun that change. We needed to go faster.
I hope the President doesn't do it because he's for re-election. I hope the President knows that really even America needs, because what we're going, they started from, let's say we lost Lebanon, we lost Iran, then we had Afghanistan and Pakistan. What will happen to America in the Middle East? And this, even the company, oil company, they don't see it. What will happen even for them? with the situation. Mr. Phares, really, I had a lot of the things that we had to ask you. But you are exceptional, my guest, that we have a lot of the things to know, and I don't need to go to the note to what I ask you. I hope that you come and you let me to interview you more, and I want you to, your voice heard by the Iranian people, and I hope that we do something, and we have something, and I hope the president and the government does something really this time for Iranian, and not the lobbyists of the Khatami, Rafsanjani in here, and the oil companies.
I do want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be heard by the Iranian people, a bright people, especially the young men and women. And it's a commitment from me to you that I'll be back on that program and we'll talk more.
I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
Very much
Merci.
for your time. Merci.